Biden's being asked to give up his nuclear codes. North Dakota passes a bill not requiring masks, and the U.S. Supreme Court weighs in on an issue related to entering homes without warrants. This is your February 25th Knots News Update. Let's dive on in. Starting us off from the Daily Caller, we have an article that Democrats asked Biden to surrender keys on the nuclear launches. If you remember earlier, when Trump was still in office, Pelosi was trying to pass a bill making it so the House would have the potential ability to say that a president is unable to fulfill their duty of office and, make it so then the vice president would take over. This seems like a step in that similar direction of making it so that the Congress would be responsible for new codes. I do think there is a reasonable standard here because it is the Congress that's supposed to declare war. However, that's rarely done. In the article, they say, while any president would presumably consult with advisors before ordering a nuclear attack, there's no requirement to do so. The letter says, according to the report, the military is obligated to carry out the order if they assess it as legal under the laws of war. Under the current posture of U.S. nuclear forces, that attack would happen in minutes. The letter suggests alternative plans, such as requiring the president to get approval for a launch order from other officials in the line of succession. This includes a vice president and the Speaker of the House, neither of whom can be removed by the president if they disagree. I think this is a very interesting standard that they're trying to set. They go in to mention how there was a push for Trump to lose the nuclear codes after January 6th. However, there's a real issue here because the president does serve as, the commander-in-chief. If you remember, they go into how Nancy Pelosi was trying to go to the military to prevent Trump from accessing the new codes, and they literally said that that would be the equivalent of a military coup. I think this is a really scary standard to be setting. However, it does, get something that I've been really pushing for, which is lacking executive control and moving it towards the legislature. I just think military is really something that should be held off to the president. From the Daily Wire, we have Manchin to vote for confirming far-left Biden nominee after AOC suggests he was racist, sexist for having unease about nominee. In the article, they write that Manchin's decision to vote to confirm Holland came after far-left Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez suggested this week that Manchin was racist and sexist for having remaining questions about whether he would vote to confirm her. Jeff Sessions was so openly racist that even Reagan couldn't appoint him. AOC claimed Manchin voted to confirm him. Sessions then targeted immigrant children for wide-scale human rights abuses with family separation. Yet the first Native woman to be cabinet secretary is where Manchin finds unease, and this was done on Twitter. I think what really the big issue here, though, is that we don't have, anything going into a particular views here. When you're saying that someone is qualified solely off of their gender or their race, that shows that you have racist intent. What AOC is really pushing for here is racism. It is sexism. And Manchin, being uneasy shows that he doesn't have, party loyalty. Something I've been really wanting to push is that individuals like Manchin, like Romney, these people that we call milquetoast that are the moderates, but really they serve a really important role of keeping their own party in line. I know I've been pushing that we really should avoid trying to primary these individuals. However, most party bases aren't as much of a fan of that. Next, from a study from skeptic.com, they go into how different political affiliations affect how many deaths Americans think are happening to African Americans every year. So they reference in here that the data on police shootings is incomplete, but they say that the data ranges from a minimum of 13 to a maximum of 27 unarmed black men that are killed in 2019, and we would assume the number is pretty similar year to year. They went and polled different political affiliations for approximating how many deaths happened each year. So if you look at this chart, we have the very liberals have roughly 15% that got in the right ballpark. So for reference, this blue mark, the about 10, and this orange mark of about 100 is probably where you would want the bulk of your answers to be. That shows that's in that teens to 20. Really, it should be closer to the blue, but if you're getting the orange, you're still in the right order of magnitude at least. So very liberals is completely off. They're ranging in the thousands, and they notably have 8% that say more than 10,000 deaths every year. The liberal has 22% and 38% in these good categories, but then another roughly 40% in this, excessively wrong. Moderates have what looks like a pretty good guess of around 73% being in the good range and 27 just completely off. If you look at conservatives, they have 86-ish percent, 87% in that right ballpark, and then maybe 10-11% that are off. And then very conservatives go a little bit more off, where they have about 78%, 79%, and then the remaining 17, 18% that are excessively over. I think what this really shows is just how much media plays a part in how many deaths we think. We see overwhelmingly there being reports of police violence on broadcasts, on big media broadcasts like CNN, MSNBC, CBS, which is where a majority of these very liberal to moderate sources are getting their information. I think also it's notable though is the people in the conservative and very conservative camps that would probably lean towards Fox, which you would expect to give this approximately 10 number, still have overwhelmingly a good chunk of their population that still fall into this greater than 1,000 deaths every year. From PBR, Business and Politics, we have North Dakota House passes a bill banning mandatory face masks. Our state is not a prison camp. The North Dakota House of Representatives just passed a bill banning requirements to wear a face mask, with Representative Jeff Hoverson, the bill's sponsor, labeling the initial mandate diabolical silliness. The vote was 50-44 on House Bill 1323 Monday to ban state and local government, businesses, and schools from passing and enforcing mask mandates. The Grand Forks Herald reported lawmakers called the mandate an infringement on the freedoms. The ban will now head to the North Dakota Senate. The previous state mandate expired in January. The bill also prohibits making use of face mask, shield, or covering a condition for entry for education, employment, or services. Hubbardson said that the mask is a part of a large apparatus of movement of unelected wealthy bureaucrats who are robbing our freedoms and perpetuating lies. He also reported said our state is not a prison camp. Just for reference, if you have a desire to wear a mask, you still can. All it is making it so you're not mandated to wear one. I think this kind of hits a couple of big points that we've been looking at. Recently, we talked about flip-flop Fauci and all the different claims that have been backtracked when it comes to what the standards are for reopening, how many masks you could use, etc. And I think we finally hit like true fatigue when it comes to mask mandates, when it comes to social distancing. I think it's a very scary precedent that they're still threatening that things won't be back to normal 2022, even though they've said that their plan is to have all vaccines available to anyone that wants it by the end of the summer. My personal opinion is if everyone has had the opportunity to have a mask or had the vaccine and things are not open up, that is when people will start revolting. From the National Review, they have an article here that Andrew Cuomo is everything the press accused Rob DeSantis of being. We've been seeing reports of DeSantis getting a lot of flack for giving the vaccines to Republican districts. Mainly the reasoning behind that is because those are the older districts, so they tend to vote Republican. However, this hits how we've seen almost a cover-up of Andrew Cuomo, and we've heard the term cuomogate in his handling of the nursing homes. In the article this day, throughout the pandemic, the press has been extraordinarily harsh on governors who was slow to act, unnecessarily endangered the lives of the elderly, alienated experts, and cooked the numbers. It's just thought the governor in question was Florida's Ron DeSantis rather than New York's Andrew Cuomo. After it became clear that Cuomo's handling of the pandemic was not just criminal in a metaphorical sense, but perhaps in a literal sense, the press has begun only reluctantly and belatedly to abandon its long-running Cuomo hagiography. It never made any sense to lionize Andrew Cuomo at the expense of Rob DeSantis, except that one had a D after his name and the other didn't. and one hated Trump and the other didn't. The national media also labors under the assumption that New York must be competent, while the Sunshine State in the preservance of the embarrassing, boorish Florida man. Something that I think is often not hit with the Florida versus New York comparisons. People sometimes say that like Florida is behind other states when it looks at per capita deaths. However, with them being open, we don't see a significant increase in how many deaths per capita you see in Florida. And if you remember early on, they were scared of there being millions on millions of deaths, which you would expect because we just hit around the 500,000 number, that we would see orders of magnitudes more of per capita deaths in Florida compared to a state like New York or any other blue-leaning state. So it just kind of hits a couple points. I think overall, a lot of governors were just put in a very stressful situation. They were panicking just like a lot of other individuals were panicking. However, this does not excuse Cuomo and his lack of accountability and in giving out information on the. Finally, the Supreme Court weighs scope of political power to enter homes without a warrant. This comes after there's a lot of criticism earlier this week against the Supreme Court for not hearing stories related to the Pennsylvania election lawsuit, and if the state legislature did have the power to change election laws going into this election without the individuals voting on it, which I believe is mandated in the state constitution. However, what they're looking at here is a suspect or a crime that was involving a California driver. He was tailed by the officer after he was reportedly honking and listening to music. And we see a couple of arguments being given by the different justices. So start from Justice Stephen Breyer. It seems ridiculous when your home isn't your castle for terribly minor things. Conservative Chief Justice John Roberts rated an example of teenagers fleeing back to their homes after being caught drinking beer in the park as an example of a situation in which warrantless entry would be inappropriate. It doesn't seem to be something that would warrant the officer, breaking into the house, Roberts said. However, if we look at conservative Justice Clarence Thomas, referred to it as a kind of endearing pursuit. Such a ruling could still allow police to enter a house without warrants in certain circumstances, even if its underlying crime was a. I think one notable thing that's a good sign here is that we're starting to get almost a sense of normality when it comes back to the Supreme Court and these types of decisions. Like this kind of thing does seem like the kind of issue that you could see, the left voting for or against, you could see the right voting for or against, and those are the kinds of cases we really want to see more of on the Supreme Court, especially in these times that there's calls for so-called unity. And this is your February 25th Not So News update. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Have a good one.